to another rousing edition, fun edition, compelling edition of murder, love, and comedy. Ah, tonight's episode, or today's episode, whenever you're hearing this episode, it's entitled Woman's Body Was Found Murdered in a Bounce Ball Pit.
Hi, everyone. It's me, the dumbass comedian from the show. Wow, this is going to be a crazy story. A woman was found murdered in a bouncy ball pit. That's nuts. I know this has nothing to do with this unsolved murder case, but I will be adding my comedy to the show.
Because that's what everybody needs. Okay, well, here's the big question. Can you solve the crime? Well, here's the lowdown. At 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, party rental business went to pick up a bouncy ball pit from Mrs. Dolores Nunez. She rented this bounce ball pit for her son Andrew's ninth birthday party. Now that was on Saturday. This amusement is basically a huge inflated air mattress, kind of like a trampoline, enclosed with padded, netted walls filled with hundreds, maybe even thousands of small, colorful, hollow plastic balls. The kids climb inside this little amusement and they jump up and down playing in the huge pool of plastic balls. And they just have a ball. See what I just did there? These ball pits can be rented out per day for things like birthday parties, neighborhood block parties, and events and so forth. You might see them in a carnival or a festival. Needless to say, the delivery guys were very shocked and a little upset when they showed up Sunday morning to deflate and pack up the ball pit. The police report states that as the two party guys showed up and were scooping up those hundreds of plastic balls from inside the ball pit, they saw a woman's body appear from under all of the plastic balls.
This is why I never go into these ball pits. You never know what you're going to find. I once went into one. I was swimming under all the balls like a submarine. When I stood up, there was a log stuck to my hair. I thought it was a Snicker candy bar, but after I took one bite, I knew it was poop. Some kid took a dump in the ball pit. So gross.
Wow, that's terrible. Funny, a little bit, but terrible. At any rate, Detective Terry Scott was the first police officer to get to the crime scene.
Upon arriving at the scene, I saw Mrs. Dolores and her husband Robert arguing in front of their house. I knew Robert from high school. We also coached Little League together.
Once Robert saw Detective Scott, he stopped arguing with his wife and he escorted the detective to the backyard.
Hey, Terry, how you been? Come with me. The bouncy ball pit's in the backyard.
The two delivery guys were sitting in their truck. While we were rushing to the ball pit, Robert told me he was against his wife's idea of getting this bouncy ball pit for their son's party.
Detective Scott leaped into the ball pit and started immediately applying CPR while checking all of her vital signs. An ambulance then appeared, and the EMTs ran to the ball pit and took over. One EMT then reached into the woman's mouth and started pulling out a few plastic balls. The EMTs then put her body, on a stretcher and brought her to the ambulance.
The EMT worker reported to me that they discovered a huge bruise on the back of this woman's head. They believe she probably passed out in the ball pit from the bruise and then inhaled the plastic balls, causing her to choke to death.
You know, I was at a restaurant once. I had chicken parmesan with pasta. The girl across the room was staring at me. You know, it's very uncomfortable eating while someone's looking at you. Then she grabbed her throat like she was trying to strangle herself. Obviously, she got into a fight with herself. At that point, I just stopped eating and left. I'm telling you, there's weirdos out there. Now, can you believe this woman had plastic balls in her mouth? Hey, I'm not going there, but let's just say she was probably a very popular woman. These are the girls you can only wish to meet on a dating site, if you know what I mean.
Hey, Terry, she's a guest at our party.
She looked familiar, like I know her.
Hey, you do. She's Joanne Tully from our high school. She graduated with us. Remember, she was the captain of the girls' softball team and dated Danny Luke, our high school football team quarterback.
You're right. She has a brother, Peter, who played on our school baseball team. He was our pitcher. So why was she at your son's party?
Her son Paul's a second baseman on my son Andrew's Little League team and is also his fourth grade classmate. My wife usually asks the parents to stay and enjoy the party. So most of the kids' parents were there enjoying the party too. You know, she goes all out for these parties, and there was catered food, even a DJ for the dancing.
Hey, where was my invitation?
Well, I remember those kid parties. Mrs. Nuna DeLuca was my best friend's mom. Every year she throws my friend Mikey a birthday party. He invited the whole class, boys and girls. His mom was the best cook, but no one ever ate her food. I remember she had a big mole on her chin with a long piece of hair hanging from it. So whenever she gave you some birthday food, the mole hair would just drop on the food. She handed me a slice of pizza once, and her mole hair was covered with tomato sauce and cheese. One time she tried lighting Mikey's birthday cake candles, and her mole hair lit up like a torch. She then started running all around. It looked like fireworks.
Wow. Thanks for the picture of that. At any rate, back to our situation. Detective Scott then asks for a guest. I can't get it out of my head. He asks for a guest list, does Detective Scott, for all the people at Andrew's birthday party. Robert prepared the guest list and gave it to her. Detective Scott went over the guest list and decided only to question the parents that stayed for the party. The guest list showed that the murdered woman, Joanne Tully, was at the party. It also showed that her old high school sweetheart, Danny Luke, and his wife, Mary, were there as well. Also, Joey Rena and his wife, Laura, Manny and Valeria Ramos, Carl and Jennifer Watts, Mrs. Peggy Stoner, and Mr. Ralph Dunn were there as well. He then called each of these people over for questioning, about Joanne Tully's actions at the party.
Can you imagine going to a party, then being called by the police for questioning? I mean, everything they would ask me, I would just say, like, what party? They gave me one beer. You gave me one beer, and I'm usually passed out on their snack table. I once got invited to a sleepover party, and it took them a year to get rid of me.
Okay, first of all, who's surprised? And second of all, you're the one can wild man. Good for you. The first couple Detective Terry questioned, they were the party hosts, Robert and Dolores Nunez. Now, the question was if they were aware of any confrontations between Joanne Tully and other party guests.
Dolores, why did you invite Joanne Tully to your son's birthday party?
To invite Joanne to the party, but Robert forced me. Joanne's son, Paul, is our school bully, and she does nothing about it. Some school kids didn't even come to the party because they knew Joanne's son, Paul, would be there. Also, I noticed that the other parents weren't even talking to her.
Hey, it was a very uncomfortable situation, but all the kids were playing and getting along.
This is why I told my wife we weren't. This is why I told my wife we weren't inviting her family to our wedding. They just stare at me and then tell her she could have done better. When the priest asked if anyone had any objections to us getting married, they all raised their hands. I yelled at them. He said, if anyone, not everyone. Oh, they're such white trash.
Okay, then. Another picture in my mind. But let's continue. Detective Terry Scott then questioned Danny Luke.
Danny, I remember you from high school. You are our high school football team's quarterback.
Oh, yeah, those were the days. Do you remember my wife, Mary? She was her football team cheerleader.
Weren't you two high school sweethearts?
Yes, we was. We went to the senior prom together.
Well, that's nice. But Danny, weren't you also dating Joanne Tully for a while back in high school?
Yeah, we dated, but we broke up. We was always fighting. She then got so mad when I started dating Mary, she got in her face after a football game and beat her up. Joanne was so crazy, she walked up behind Mary and hit her with a softball bag. She started punching her face and all. And then Mary's cheerleading friends jumped in and pulled Joanne off her. She got suspended from school. You know, by the way, Joanne got divorced a few years ago because she caught her husband cheating.
I used to date a high school cheerleader. Well, she wasn't really on the cheering squad, but she would stand in the school's parking lot and cheer. I would stand by her and yell out the cheers too. Woo! But she got mad and told the school security that I was distracting her. Security didn't stop me from going into the school parking lot, so I just stood outside the fence and continued cheering anyway. Let's go, team! Woo!
I really hope you didn't have pom poms. At any rate, the next couple question would be Joey and Laura Rena. They admitted to not talking to Joanne at the party. They said a year ago they had some sort of an incident with her.
What caused the confrontation between you two?
I ran a fundraiser at school. Many of the school parents agreed to bake goods for the school bake sale. Joanna volunteers to bake cookies but never did. When I confronted her about the missing cookies, she told me to get a job and stop living off my husband's paycheck. I told her at least I was married and could keep a husband.
I baked cookies once for my kids' school fundraiser, and they were so delicious. I know this because I ate them all.
Of course you did. Moving on. Detective Scott then questioned Manny and Valeria Ramos, who were also at Andrew's birthday party.
Can you folks tell me about your relationship with Joanne?
We had no relationship with her. We were friends with her brother Paul Tooley. In fact, I worked with Peter at electric company. We were both electricians.
They are just work friends. My husband Manny doesn't go to bars with him to drink alcohol. Peter is just a good guy, but the Tully family are heavy drinkers. You know that Joanne and her brother Peter were both alcoholics. We all could smell the alcohol coming from Joanne's body at the party.
I'm not saying we had alcoholics in my family. Growing up, we never had Legos to play with, but I can remember building things with all the liquor bottles. I once built a bridge using beer cans that went right across the street.
Oh my goodness. Does it ever end with you? At any rate, so now we know about Peter Tully. Detective Scott then interviews Carl Watts. Carl was also at the party.
Did you two see any unusual events at the party?
Well, I was surprised to see Peggy Stoner there. It was a bit uncomfortable for me to see her walk around like she still lived there. You know, Peggy is Robert Nunez's ex-wife. They had a real bad divorce. The entire neighborhood one night saw Peggy throwing Robert's clothes right out of their bedroom window all over their driveway. The neighbors, they're still finding his clothes in the yard. And I mean, Robert, he's a great guy and all, but he has some real anger issues. And I remember one time I did see Peggy one day with a red face and a black eye.
Wow, that's pretty sad. You have to wonder how people fall in love, then hate each other. This is why I only really love myself. And it's hard because I'm always fighting with myself.
Multiple personalities, anyone? Anyone? Okay. Detective Scott called Peggy Stoner over for questioning. She confirmed that she was once married to Robert Nunez, and they are now divorced.
Can you tell me about your divorce from Robert Nunez?
I blame Robert's wife, Dolores, for our divorce. She broke up our marriage. Robert wanted kids and I couldn't have any. We've been trying for years. So Robert started cheating on me with Dolores. I caught them together. Joanne saw them checking into a motel together. Then she called and told me where the motel was. I went there and the cheat signed in using his real name. So I knocked on the motel door and he opened it just wearing a towel. I rushed into the room and saw Dolores lying naked on the bed. So that night, I went home and threw all his clothes out on the driveway. Joanne then came over and comforted me. She was even there when Robert came home and kicked in our front door. He then started hitting me and even smacked Joanne. He was so lucky she didn't press charges, or else he would be in jail.
So, who are Andrew's parents?
Andrew is Dolores' son from a previous marriage.
Can you imagine finding out that your spouse is cheating on you? I told my wife, if you were ever going to cheat on me, please tell me first. So she did. No, I'm only kidding. She never told me. I found out when the guy came to pick her up for their date.
Oh, hopefully he didn't have a corsage. At any rate, the last person that Detective Scott questioned was Mr. Ralph Dunn. He too was at the party, and many of these other guests mentioned the confrontation that he had with Joanne at the party.
Now, Mr. Dunn, I heard you had a confrontation with Joanne Tully.
Yeah, well, my son Billy got hurt in the bouncy ball pit, Joanne's son Paul, he started bullying my boy, playing roughhouse in the bounce ball pit. All the other kids were having fun, playing nice, jumping up and down amongst the balls, but Paul kept jumping on my Billy. Thank goodness one of the other parents, or one of the other kids rather, now that I think of it, ran up to me and said, "Hey, yo, Paul was hurting my son Billy." So I ran to the bouncy ball pit. I saw Paul sitting on him. He was under all of those plastic balls, so I jumped into the ball pit myself and pushed that Paul kid off of my son.
Was
Yo.
your son was he okay? Was he hurt?
Well, his nose was bleeding a little bit and his eyeglasses were smashed. And, I then confronted Joanne about her son's bullying ways. And she just started laughing and, told me to stop being a mother hen and go ahead, let him play. That's when I left the party with my son. I mean, I'm still going to bill her for Paul's broken eyeglasses. Don't care if she's dead and all. I'm still going to bill her.
I had a class bully. It got so bad I refused to go to school. Every day I was either pushed or called names. My father had to come to school and talk to my teacher about what was going on. He told her that I was being bullied and she had to do something. She just laughed and said, "No way, that girl is still bullying me."
Who's surprised? Anybody? Anybody? Show of hands. Who's surprised? Yeah, okay. Well, okay. This murder case of a woman's body found dead in the bouncy ball pit is still unsolved. Can you solve the crime? Who do you think murdered Miss Joanne Tully? Was it Danny and Mary Luke? Or maybe Joey and Laura Rena? About Manny and Valeria Ramos? Peggy Stoner or Ralph Dunn? Someone hit Joanne in the back of her head, causing her to pass out in the bouncing ball pit, where she, of course, kind of inhaled a little bit these balls and choked to death, it looks like. So, who do you think murdered Joanne Tully?
Well, let me tell you that this is a very complicated murder. Someone had to catch Joanne near the bouncy ball pit, then sneak up on her like a ninja and smash her in the back of her head. This, my friend, wasn't a planned murder, but one of pure anger towards her.
Oh, gee, here we go. I thought your mom stopped you from watching the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. She said they gave you nightmares and that you peed the bed.
Listen, Joanne seemed to have a lot of issues from a cheating, abusive ex-husband, an alcohol problem, and a young son who's a bully. And she's like every girl on those internet dating sites.
How do you know that?
Because I'm dating them.
Oh,
Now, who murdered Joanne Tully? Well, it wasn't Robert and his wife Dolores Nunez. They aren't going to ruin their own party. Plus, they had to put a deposit down on that bouncy ball pit. So why would they murder her near it? They're not taking any chance of that bouncy ball pit getting damaged and causing them to lose their deposit.
well, okay. That's about the first thing you've said that does make sense.
Now, let's look at Danny and Mary Luke. Danny didn't murder her because he dated her in high school. He stated that they were always fighting. So He's used to her crap. Why would he murder her now?
I'm still not used to your nonsense. Talking like you know something.
However, his wife Mary is a different story. Joanne beat her up in high school, and she hit Mary from behind with her softball bag before punching her. Mary only got saved because of her cheerleading friends. So I'm just saying maybe Mary wanted payback. She may have caught Joanne drunk outside by the bouncy ball pit and hit her while she was cheering and hit her while doing a cheering flip, caught her right in the back of the neck, then threw her in the bouncy ball pit. This makes sense to me. However, I don't think that's what happened because cheerleaders are loud people and she would have been heard cheering.
See, you did it again. Complete, utter, total nonsense. She was a cheerleader in high school, not today. Do you know any adults still acting like a cheerleader and or even cheering someplace?
Yeah, I do.
Oof.
I still cheer. Now, let's talk about Joey and Laura Renna. There's no way these two Karens are the murderers. They are the parents behind every fundraiser event at school. And her husband Joey loves her baked goods. What husband wouldn't like a good muffin? Like, if you know what I mean.
See, that's terrible. With your mind always going toward the gutter like that. This case has nothing to do with her baked goods, if you know what I mean.
Well, I wish it did. Now, let's look at Carl and Jennifer Watts. They are just nosy neighbors. Carl is probably wearing some of Robert's clothes that he found when Robert's ex-wife Peggy Stoner threw them all over their driveway. It was like a shopping day for him.
Oh, come on now. Quit making stuff up. You don't even know if they're the same size.
And Miss Peggy Stoner is not the murderer. She's Robert's ex-wife and a close proer. But she had no issues with Joanne. If she was going to murder anyone, she would have murdered her cheating ex-husband, Robert. Now, if they found Mr. Robert Nunez was murdered lying in his driveway in a pile of clothes, then we would know who did it.
Okay, come on now. Stick to this murder. The woman's body found in the bouncy ball pit.
Well, listen, let's talk about Mr. Ralph Dunn. He seems to be the perfect suspect. If you had to pick someone for being the murderer, this man became a T-Rex when protecting his kid from being bullied by Joanne Tully's son. And he just sounds tough. And when his kid's eyeglasses got broken, he confronted her about it. And he left the party mad. When my eyeglasses got broken by a school bully, my dad fixed them by putting a piece of duct tape over the cracked lenses to keep them together. Listen, it worked, but all I ever saw was that duct tape. I failed like every test. They called me special.
Well, then, I'll be darned. Listen, this murder case is not about your duct tape eyeglasses. The question is, who murdered Joanne Tully? Can you solve the crime?
Yes, it was probably Valerie Ramos. She caught her husband Manny going out to bars drinking alcohol with Joanne's brother Peter Tully. She confronted Joanne near the bouncy ball pit and told her about this. Joanne called her husband Manny an alcoholic, and that's when Valerie got mad and hit her with a party folding chair right in the back of the head, thus causing Joanne to fall into the bouncy ball pit. Valerie then went back to the party, and Joanne Tully just sunk down into those plastic balls and choked to death. There you go.
And yet again, you really seem to maybe have no idea what happened. As usual, talking all this nonsense. You're just a dumbass.
Who you calling a dumbass?
Here ends The Woman's Body Found Murdered in a Bouncy Ball Pit, produced by our good friends at Hamilton Radio, Gino DiPiero. Brought to you also by You Ain't Getting Paid, so don't even ask. We'll get there one day, but today's not that day. And I want to thank all of the characters, for being a part of our show tonight. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for watching and listening. Yeah, there's Joel saying, yo, yo, yo. And remember, tune in next time because it's going to be another compelling, fun, interesting murder, love, woo, and comedy. And as always, the big question is, can you solve the crime? Till next time, for everybody here at Murder, Love, and Comedy, I'm your narrator, John Thielon. We'll catch you next time. Stay safe.